Sometimes the words we never say become the loudest echoes in our hearts. This is a story about a woman named Emily and a letter she wrote but never sent. Years passed, seasons changed, yet that letter stayed hidden, untouched, unread, and full of emotions that once burned brighter than the sun. We all have something unsent, a message, a feeling, a truth we were too afraid to share. But what if one day life gave us another chance to open that chapter again? This is the letter she never sent. Part 1. The Weight of Words. Some people collect photographs, others collect words they never said. Emily collected both. The morning silence. It was 6:30 on a gray Boston morning. The sun was still shy behind the clouds, and the air carried that kind of chill that made the world feel slower, quieter, softer. Emily sat on her couch with her knees tucked under a blanket, sipping her first coffee of the day. She watched the condensation gather on the window and race down in small, trembling drops. Her apartment looked like a page from a storybook, tidy, warm, filled with colors that didn't shout but whispered. Bookshelves lined the walls, candles stood on every corner, half burned. On the table lay her journal, open to a blank page, waiting for her to write. But she didn't. She just stared at the page, at the world, at herself reflected in the glass. Because sometimes silence spoke louder than any sentence she could form. Her phone buzzed. It was her assistant, Claire. A cheerful voice note popped up. "Morning, Em. Don't forget, you've got that online coaching session at 9. Also, I bought croissants. Come early if you want one." Emily smiled softly. Claire was her sunshine. Bright, clumsy, always talking too fast, always meaning well. She replied with a short voice note. "Thanks, Claire. I'll be there soon. And yes, save me one. Preferably not the burned one." She ended the recording with a laugh that didn't quite reach her heart. The lesson she preached. By 9, Emily was in her studio, a quiet, cozy space where she recorded her podcasts and taught her online self-development classes. The camera light blinked on, and she adjusted her microphone. She smiled, the practiced kind that hid her worries perfectly. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice gentle and calm. "Today's topic is something very personal. Letting go of what you never said." She paused. Her eyes flickered toward the small wooden box on the shelf behind her. "We all have words we didn't say," she continued. "Things we held back because we were scared. Scared of rejection, scared of loss, scared of changing what already felt fragile. But silence doesn't protect us forever. Sometimes it becomes the very thing that keeps us from healing." As she spoke, she could feel her throat tighten. Her mind wasn't thinking about her students anymore. It was thinking about him, Daniel Harper, the man who once told her that love was the truest form of art. She blinked away the thoughts and forced a smile back on. So today's lesson, she concluded softly, is to write down one thing you never said. Not to send it, not to fix the past, but to free yourself. When she ended the session, the applause emojis and kind comments filled her screen. But all she could see was the reflection of that wooden box. She walked toward it, lifted it from the shelf, and traced the carvings on its lid. It was her father's old box, simple, wooden, and slightly chipped on one corner. Inside it were a few things that defined her entire adult life. A dried flower from Daniel's first gift, a photograph of a sunset he painted for her, and one folded piece of paper, yellowed, fragile, still sealed. The letter she never sent. The ghost of a lesson. Emily sat by the window and held the box close. The city below moved on, cars honking, people hurrying, life unbothered. But in her world, time stood still. She remembered her mother's words, said years ago in their small home in Chicago. Emmy, don't depend too much on love. It makes people weak. Her mother had loved fiercely once and had been left just as fiercely. Emily grew up watching her mother cry quietly at night, pretending everything was fine by morning. So she built herself differently. Independent, strong, in control. She learned early that silence was safer than confession. But now in her mid-30s, sitting in her quiet Boston apartment, that silence felt less like safety and more like a cage. She whispered, almost to herself, I teach people how to move on, but maybe I never did. A visit from Claire. The next morning, Claire stopped by with coffee and her usual whirlwind of chatter. Em, you look like you didn't sleep, Claire said, tossing her purse onto the couch. I didn't, Emily admitted, stretching. I was thinking. Thinking? Oh, that's always dangerous. Emily chuckled. Do you ever wonder if you've left something unfinished in your life? Claire grinned. I leave laundry unfinished every week. Emily rolled her eyes. I mean, emotionally unfinished, Claire. Claire sat beside her, noticing the wooden box on the table. Emily hesitated. Just memories. Claire raised an eyebrow. Old love stuff? Emily smiled faintly. Something like that. Claire leaned back, thoughtful for a moment. You know, Em, you always help everyone else find closure. Maybe it's your turn. Emily looked out the window, silent. She wanted to say, I'm fine. She wanted to laugh it off, but instead she whispered, maybe you're right. The letter calls. That night, after Claire left, the apartment felt heavier. The air was filled with a strange pull, as if the past was whispering through the walls. Emily turned on her lamp and opened the box again. She took the letter out. The paper was soft now, aged, but the handwriting still neat and delicate. The version of herself that existed before fear, before logic, before regret. She held it to her chest and closed her eyes. Memories returned like waves, laughter echoing in a New York cafe, Daniel's paint-stained hands brushing against hers, his voice saying, "Someday, Em, you'll realize that silence is just another language of love." She smiled through the sting of tears. "I'm realizing it now, Daniel," she whispered. She placed the letter gently back into the box, not ready to open it yet. But for the first time in 12 years, she wasn't afraid to. And just like that, the walls of her present began to blur as the story drifted back to where it all began. Part 2: The Artist and the Dreamer. Every story of love begins with a coincidence. But sometimes, the coincidence was written long before the first meeting. New York, 12 years ago. It was the spring of 2013. New York City looked alive, as if every building had a story and every person was part of it. Emily was 24 then, new in the city, freshly graduated, and freshly terrified. She had just joined a small publishing firm as an editor. Her job was to read, correct, and quietly fix other people's words, something she had a natural gift for. But she was quiet, too quiet. The kind of person who blended into corners and found safety in routine. That morning, she was on her way to a local art gallery. Her boss had sent her to review an art exhibit, to see if the featured artist's portfolio could inspire a book collaboration. She didn't know that this errand would change the course of her life. The meeting. The gallery smelled faintly of paint and coffee, white walls, tall windows, soft jazz in the background. Emily walked slowly, notebook in hand, pretending to analyze the paintings. They were abstract, bold colors, messy lines, yet strangely peaceful. Then a voice broke the silence behind her. "They look chaotic, don't they?" She turned. A man stood there holding a paintbrush and a cup of coffee, tall, relaxed, wearing a denim shirt splattered with color. His hair was uncombed in that effortless artist way. "But chaos," he added with a grin, "is just passion without fear." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "I was just admiring your use of red," she said awkwardly. He chuckled. "You sound like someone who loves order. Red scares you a little, doesn't it?" Her lips parted. "Maybe." "Good," he said. "Then you're exactly who I paint for." And that was how she met Daniel Harper, the artist whose art felt like emotion itself. They spent an hour talking that day. He told her he didn't paint for galleries. He painted to understand himself. She told him she wrote words but never shared them, because they sound better in my head than out loud. Daniel had smiled and said, "That's because you're afraid someone might misunderstand your silence." She looked at him, speechless. How could he read her so easily? Before she left, he tore a piece from his sketch pad, drew a tiny red heart made of brushstrokes, and handed it to her. "Take this," he said, "for courage." "You'll need it," she kept it. Even 12 years later, that tiny sketch still lay in her father's box. Coffee and confessions days turned into weeks. Emily found herself visiting Daniel's gallery more often. At first out of curiosity, then out of something she didn't dare name. He would paint. She would read in a corner. Sometimes they barely spoke, and yet silence between them never felt empty. One evening, as the city lights began to glow, Daniel offered her coffee. "You're always reading," he said, sitting beside her. "What's your story, Emily?" She shrugged. "I edit other people's stories. Mine isn't that interesting." He laughed softly. "You just haven't written it yet." She smiled. "You talk like a book I'd never finish." "Then maybe," he said, leaning closer, "I'm the book you're supposed to start." Emily looked down, her heart beat loud enough to drown the city outside. Nobody had ever spoken to her like that, not with charm, but with truth. That night, when she went home, she opened her journal for the first time in months. At the top of the page, she wrote, "He paints chaos, and somehow I see myself in every stroke." The lesson in fear. Weeks later, they were sitting by the river, the wind playing with Daniel's hair. "You know what I've learned?" Daniel said. "Fear is just imagination aimed in the wrong direction." Emily smiled faintly. "Easy for you to say. You live in color. I live in words." He chuckled. "Words are colors too. You just hide them behind grammar." She laughed, surprised. "You're impossible." "I'm an artist," he replied. "We specialize in the impossible." They fell silent, watching the sunset melt into gold. After a long pause, Daniel said quietly, "Have you ever been in love?" Emily hesitated. "No, not really." He turned to her. "Why not?" She looked at the river. "Because love makes people lose control." Daniel studied her for a long time. "Or maybe," he said gently, "it makes them finally free." The distance. As the months passed, their connection deepened. But so did Emily's fear. Daniel was unpredictable, full of life, painting through the night, missing appointments, living like time didn't exist. Emily lived by lists and deadlines. Sometimes he would show up at her office with wild ideas. "Let's drive to Vermont tonight. The sky is clear," she'd smile sadly. "I have a meeting tomorrow." He'd sigh. "You always have something tomorrow, Em." And she did. Always something responsible, something safe. Still, every time he looked at her, she felt like the world could stop and she wouldn't mind. One evening, they stood on the Brooklyn Bridge, city lights sparkling around them. Daniel looked at her and said, "I'm getting an offer. Paris. 6 months to work with an art collective." Her heart sank. "That's incredible. Wait," she said, forcing a smile. He nodded slowly. "It is. But I don't know if I can leave." His eyes searched hers, waiting for a reason to stay. But Emily, frozen by her own walls, said quietly, You should go. Opportunities like that don't come twice. Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe neither do people. He left a week later. No goodbyes at the airport, no dramatic scenes. Just a quiet text. Don't let your silence become your story. Emily never replied. Instead, she wrote a letter, pouring every feeling she couldn't say. But when she sealed it, she couldn't mail it. That was the letter she never sent. It's strange how we lose people not because they leave, but because we don't ask them to stay. Part 3. The Separation. Sometimes love doesn't end with anger. Sometimes it just fades quietly because no one was brave enough to speak. The last night. The night before Daniel left, the city was draped in silver mist. Emily couldn't sleep. Every streetlight seemed softer, every sound sharper, like the world was listening to her silence. She sat by her window with her journal open, pen in hand, staring at the page. Words had always been her escape, but tonight, they felt like a confession she wasn't ready to make. Her phone lit up. Daniel, I'm leaving early tomorrow. I wanted to see you one last time. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Her heart begged her to say yes, but her fear, the same quiet, logical fear that had guided her all her life, whispered, don't complicate it. Let him go. So she typed, you should rest. Have a safe flight, Daniel. Then she put the phone down and cried silently, the kind of tears that make no sound but leave the soul aching. The next morning, she woke to the sound of rain. She walked to the cafe they used to visit, pretending it was just another day. But everything, the seat by the window, the smell of espresso, the faint music, whispered his name. On the counter was a small note addressed to her. The barista smiled. The artist guy left this for you. Emily's hands trembled as she unfolded it. You once said love makes people lose control. Maybe you're right. But maybe losing control is what we both needed. I hope someday you'll learn that silence isn't strength. Goodbye, Em. There was a sketch of her. Her eyes half smiling, her hair falling over her face. Just like he always saw her. She pressed the note to her chest and whispered, goodbye, Daniel. The letter. That night, Emily finally sat down to write. The rain outside hadn't stopped. It became the rhythm for her thoughts. She pulled out a piece of ivory paper, dipped her pen, and began. Dear Daniel, I don't know if this letter will ever find you, but I need to write it. If only to tell the truth I was too afraid to say. You were right. I hide behind calmness because I'm terrified of chaos. And you were beautiful chaos. You made me feel alive in ways I didn't know existed. You made me see that silence isn't peace. It's loneliness dressed in control. I wanted to tell you I love you. I just didn't know how. Maybe one day, if we meet again, I'll say it out loud. Until then, I'll keep painting my world with your colors. She paused, tears blurring the ink. Then she folded the letter carefully, sealed it, and placed it inside a plain envelope. She wrote his name, Daniel Harper, but she never added an address. She placed it inside her father's old wooden box and whispered, "Someday, maybe." The empty mornings. The days turned into weeks. Her mornings were quieter, her laughter rarer. She went to work, smiled when expected, spoke kindly, but inside she felt like a story with missing pages. Claire noticed. "You're somewhere else these days, Em," she said one afternoon. Emily looked up from her notes. "I'm fine." Claire shook her head. "You're not fine. You're surviving." Emily smiled faintly. "Isn't that what everyone does?" Claire leaned forward. "No, some people live. You used to." The word struck something deep in her chest. The part of her that once laughed freely, that believed love could be an adventure. That night, Emily opened the wooden box again and touched the sealed letter. She whispered, "Maybe this isn't just for him. Maybe it's for the part of me I lost." The unsent truth. Over the next few months, Emily poured herself into her work. Her podcasts became more emotional, her advice more personal. People started calling her the quiet voice that heals. She helped thousands of strangers let go of regret, never realizing she was talking to herself. Her listeners often wrote, "You changed my life. Your words healed me." But after every recording, she would sit alone in her studio, staring at the box on the shelf. One evening, she whispered into the microphone, "Off the record, sometimes healing isn't about forgetting. It's about forgiving the version of yourself that didn't know better." And in that moment, she realized she wasn't just talking to her audience anymore. She was talking to the girl who once let love slip away. The flashback dream. That night, Emily dreamt of Daniel. They were in his studio. The air smelled of paint and rain. He was standing by a canvas, painting something bright. She walked closer. It was her, older, wiser, holding a letter in her hand. Daniel turned to her and smiled. "You finally said it, didn't you?" She tried to speak, but her voice caught. "You don't have to say it," he whispered. "You wrote it. That's enough." When she woke up, her pillow was damp with tears. She looked toward the window. Dawn was breaking. For the first time in years, she didn't feel regret. She felt gratitude for having loved it all. Sometimes silence teaches us what words never could. Love doesn't always need to last to be real. Previously on The Letter She Never Sent, she was a woman who helped others heal, but never found the courage to heal herself. 12 years ago, Emily met Daniel, an artist who painted chaos like it was beauty. She loved him deeply, but her fear of losing control made her lose him instead. He left for Paris. She wrote him a letter. one she never sent. Years passed. Her silence became her comfort, and her success became her disguise. But somewhere between the applause and the empty nights, she realized you can teach the world to move on and still be standing in the same place yourself. Part 4, 12 Years of Silence. The world applauded her wisdom, but she would have traded every cheer for one more honest conversation. The Studio of Secrets. 12 years had passed since that letter was sealed. Emily was now a name people recognized, a published author, a motivational speaker, and a voice that millions listened to online. Her podcasts were called The Gentle Path, and every episode ended with the same words: healing begins when you stop running from yourself. Ironically, she still was. Her studio had changed, larger, sleeker, filled with framed quotes and lighting setups. But the same wooden box sat quietly on the top shelf, untouched. Every time she filmed a video, the camera angle was set so that box stayed out of frame, hidden from her audience, just like the truth was hidden from her heart. Claire was still by her side, now her full-time manager and closest friend. "Your new book tour is confirmed," Claire said one afternoon, scrolling on her tablet. "Boston, Chicago, and New York. You're officially unstoppable." Emily smiled politely. Unstoppable sounds exhausting. Claire laughed. "You say that every time. You're living your dream, Em." Emily looked at her reflection in the glass wall. Perfect hair, graceful smile, eyes that looked tired. "I'm living a dream," she said softly. "I'm not sure if it's mine." The woman who couldn't sleep success had brought comfort, but not peace. She slept little. The nights were long and filled with echoes, voices of the people she had once counseled and one she had never answered. She often walked through the city at midnight, hood up, unseen. It reminded her of her younger self, invisible, safe, silent. Sometimes she'd stop by a street artist painting under a lamp and just watch. She loved the smell of acrylic, the slow movement of the brush. But she never bought the paintings. Maybe she couldn't bear to own anything that reminded her of him. The first client. One morning, she met a client named Lara, a 28-year-old musician. Lara sat across from Emily, eyes red, voice trembling. "I broke up with him," Lara said. "He wanted me to follow him abroad. I said no. I told myself it was for my career. But now, everything feels empty." Emily listened quietly, recognizing the same tremor she once had. "Do you think you made the wrong choice?" she asked softly. Lara nodded, tears falling. "I don't know. Maybe I was scared. I didn't want to lose myself in someone else's dream." Emily leaned forward. Sometimes fear dresses up as logic, but deep down, we know when we're just protecting our pride. Lara looked at her confused. "Have you ever felt that way?" Emily smiled, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 memories. Every day, she whispered. When Laura left, Emily sat alone in her office for a long time. Her advice had helped someone, but each word had been a confession she wasn't ready to make out loud. The teacher who forgot her own lesson. Months later, her book, The Art of Letting Go, became a bestseller. She spoke on stages, under bright lights, in front of thousands who called her an inspiration. But every time she looked out at those faces, she thought of Daniel's voice. You're afraid someone might misunderstand your silence. During one talk in Chicago, she paused mid-sentence. The crowd waited, silent. We spend so much time teaching people how to move forward, she said slowly. But sometimes healing means looking back, not to stay there, but to understand where we stopped. Her audience applauded, but in her heart, something ached because she knew where she had stopped. New York, the art gallery, the man who painted chaos, the whisper in the night. That night in her hotel room, Emily couldn't sleep again. She walked to the balcony staring at the skyline. The city lights below blurred into a million golden stars, each one a memory she never allowed herself to feel fully. She whispered to the wind, Are you still painting, Daniel? Her phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Hey, just got an invite for you. There's an art exhibition in New York next month, celebrating artists who inspire change. I think you'll love it. Emily's breath caught. For a moment, her heart stilled. She typed slowly. Who's hosting it? A pause. Then Claire's reply. A guy named Daniel Harper. Ring a bell? The phone slipped from Emily's hand. The world seemed to spin around her, the years collapsing in one breath. 12 years of silence. And now fate was knocking. The dream returns. That night she dreamt again. She was back in his studio, surrounded by unfinished canvases. Only this time, Daniel wasn't painting her, he was painting letters. Each letter glowed faintly, floating in the air, forming words she could finally read. I forgave you long before you asked. When she woke, she felt calm for the first time in years. Not happy, not sad, just ready. The decision. The next morning, Claire found her already dressed, suitcase packed. Wait, what's happening? Claire asked. Emily smiled faintly. You said there's an exhibition in New York, right? Claire blinked. Don't tell me. I need to go? Emily interrupted gently. Not for him, for me. Claire hugged her tightly. You sure you're ready for this? Emily nodded. I've spent 12 years helping people find peace. Maybe it's time I find mine. She took the wooden box from the shelf, opened it for the first time in years, and looked at the letter. The paper had aged, but the words still carried warmth. She didn't open it. Not yet. She just held it close as she whispered, Let's see what silence has been waiting to say. The journey. The train ride from Boston to New York was long, but peaceful. She sat by the window, headphones on, watching the landscape blur into color. The rhythm of the tracks matched the rhythm of her heartbeat, steady, nervous, alive. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from her past. She was traveling toward it. Sometimes it takes years to return to the moment you were meant to face, but healing doesn't care about time. It only cares about truth. The gallery encounter. The train slid into Grand Central like a sigh released after years of silence. Emily stepped out, suitcase in hand, heart drumming against her ribs. 12 years of avoidance had brought her here to the same city where she'd once believed love could rewrite her story. She didn't rush. The city looked different. New glass towers, new ads, same restless heartbeat. Every corner whispered memories. Every cafe looked like a place they might have once gone. It's strange, she thought. When you heal halfway, even peace feels incomplete. Echoes in the rain. Outside the station, rain began to fall. Soft, steady, cleansing. She let it touch her face, refusing to open the umbrella. For the first time, she didn't mind getting wet. Her cab rolled through Manhattan, headlights blurring against the windows. The address Claire had sent glowed on her phone. Harper and Company. Gallery, exhibition. Artists who inspire. Change her pulse quickened. The same last name she'd once practiced writing in secret letters. Inside the gallery. The building was minimalist. White walls, soft lighting, quiet music. People moved slowly, murmuring admiration at canvases filled with color and chaos. Each painting told a story of pain turned into purpose. Storms became light. Broken shapes formed faces that smiled through the cracks. Emily walked from one to another, her breath catching at a familiar brush stroke, a swirl of blue and amber she'd once seen in his old studio. A small plaque beneath it read, "The Letter She Never Sent," by Daniel Harper. Her knees nearly gave way. There it was. The title she had carried in silence for 12 years. She stepped closer, eyes stinging. The canvas showed a desk, a candle, a folded paper glowing like hope. Around it, shades of gray faded into light, as if forgiveness itself were being painted. Beautiful, isn't it? A gentle voice spoke beside her. Emily turned. A woman in her mid-30s stood there, calm eyes, kind smile, wearing a curator's badge. Anna Harper. The name hit like thunder and calm rain at once. Daniel's wife. Emily managed a polite nod. It's breathtaking. Anna smiled warmly. He painted it after reading an old letter he found years ago. He never said who wrote it, only that it changed how he understood love. Emily's throat tightened. So he did receive it. Somehow. Or maybe fate had written its own version. She whispered, "Did he ever find peace?" Anna studied the painting for a long moment. "I think he found acceptance. Peace is a process, not a place." The unexpected voice. A voice carried softly from behind them. You always were good at finding meanings, Anna. Emily froze. That voice, older, deeper, but unmistakably his. She turned. Daniel stood a few steps away, dressed simply in a dark coat, a streak of silver in his hair. Time had etched lines around his eyes, but his gaze still held that same curious warmth. The kind that saw people, not just looked at them. For a heartbeat, neither moved. 12 years collapsed into one impossible second. Anna smiled knowingly. I'll give you two a moment. She slipped away, leaving silence between them. Daniel spoke first. You came. Emily exhaled shakily. I wasn't sure I could. He smiled softly. Neither was I. They stood in front of the painting, the letter between them like a living memory. You named it after my letter, she whispered. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Your letter? Her heart raced. I never sent it. But I wrote one. The night you left. Every word I was too afraid to say. Daniel looked at her for a long time, then said quietly, maybe you didn't need to send it. I felt it anyway, the conversation time owed them. They walked to a quieter corner where a single bench faced the rain-streaked windows. You became everything I knew you would, Daniel said. Your books helped me during dark times. Emily laughed softly. Imagine that. My lessons healing the man who inspired them. He tilted his head. Do you still believe in letting go? She hesitated. I believe in holding on differently. He smiled. Same lesson, new words. Silence settled. Not heavy this time, but gentle, like an old friend sitting between them. I thought of you whenever I painted storms, he said. You were the calm after. Her eyes glistened. And you were the chaos that taught me peace. The lesson of timing. The gallery began to empty. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered through glass. Daniel turned toward her. We were too young to understand that love isn't about fixing each other. It's about growing without losing ourselves. Emily nodded slowly. I used to think timing ruined us. Now I think it saved us, so we could meet again without needing to be saved. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small card and handed it to her. A simple sketch, a bridge over water, two figures standing on opposite sides, smiling. If you ever want to talk, not about the past, just about art and rain, he said, you know where to find me. She took it, fingers brushing his, a soft spark, not of romance reborn, but of closure granted. Departure. As she stepped outside, the city lights blurred through the wet pavement. Her reflection looked different now, not haunted, but whole. She whispered to herself, some stories don't need an ending. They just need understanding. She walked away, holding the card and her old letter close, realizing something beautiful. The real courage was never in sending the letter. It was in finally reading what her silence had been trying to say. Life learning reflection. People often believe closure means answers, but sometimes it simply means seeing the same memory with kinder eyes. Healing isn't about forgetting who hurt you, it's about remembering who you were before the hurt and choosing to return there stronger. Part 6. The Second Letter and Healing. The morning after the exhibition, the city felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just clearer. Emily walked through the early mist of Manhattan with no umbrella, a paper cup of coffee in one hand, and Daniel's little sketch tucked safely in her coat pocket. Every breath felt lighter. It wasn't joy exactly, it was release, like unclenching a fist you didn't know you'd been holding for years. The return journey. On the train back to Boston, the rhythm of the tracks carried a softness she'd never noticed before. Through the window, sunlight shimmered on fields washed clean by rain. For 12 years, she'd looked at the world through regret. Now she saw it through gratitude. Maybe closure isn't a door closing, she thought. Maybe it's a window opening just wide enough to let in light. She took out her phone and opened the Notes app. No posts, no drafts, no followers waiting for wisdom, just a blank page. At the top, she typed 3 words. The second letter. Home again. When she stepped into her apartment, sunlight filtered through the curtains like forgiveness. The wooden box still sat on the shelf, patient and unchanged. Emily placed the new sketch beside it and smiled. Her phone buzzed. Claire again. So? Tell me everything. Was it beautiful? Was he? Emily laughed gently. It was enough, Claire. It was finally enough. Claire paused, then softened her voice. You sound different. I think I am, Emily said. For the first time, I don't want to teach anything. I just want to feel the desk revisited. That night, she lit a candle, the same way she had 12 years ago when she wrote the first letter. But this time, the paper wasn't for someone else. She whispered, almost smiling, Dear Emily, and the pen began to move. Dear Emily, you've spent years explaining healing to others while postponing your own. You've carried love like a secret weight, afraid that setting it down meant losing part of yourself. But tonight, you know, letting go isn't the same as forgetting. It's remembering without pain, remembering with peace. She paused, eyes glistening. Her own handwriting looked softer now, no longer trembling between regret and pride. Reflections in silence. She rose, walked to the balcony, and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably painting again. Perhaps another storm, perhaps another sunrise. She whispered into the wind, Thank you for being the unfinished chapter that taught me how to write the rest of the book. A quiet tear traced her cheek, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. Then she went back inside and continued writing, this time with a calm, steady rhythm, each line a gentle promise to herself. Excerpt from the second letter. You will still miss him sometimes. That's okay. Missing is proof that you were brave enough to love. You will still wake up on rainy mornings and think of what could have been. But now, instead of wishing to relive it, you will simply smile. Because some stories are meant to be lived once and remembered forever. Keep painting your own piece. Keep walking your own path. With forgiveness, you she placed the pen down and closed her eyes. The candle flickered once, then steadied. Its flame reflected in her eyes like a quiet heartbeat finally aligned. Sometimes, she thought, the bravest thing isn't saying goodbye. It's saying thank you. The morning of peace. At dawn, the city still slept. Emily walked along the harbor where the water met the first breath of sunlight. In her hands, she carried the new letter, folded, sealed, tied with a thin blue ribbon. She watched the sky shift from violet to gold. For years, she had feared endings. Now she saw that the sky itself ended and began every single day. She sat on the old wooden bench facing the sea, the same spot where she had once dreamed of escape. Today, it felt like home. You don't owe the past anything except gratitude, she whispered. She placed the letter on the bench beside her and let the breeze lift its edge. The paper fluttered, hesitated, then settled again, deciding perhaps to stay. She smiled. All right then. You can rest here too, the voice within. She closed her eyes and listened. The slow wash of waves, the whisper of gulls, the low hum of the waking world. For the first time, silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of everything she had lived, lost, and learned. Images drifted through her mind. Daniel's smile at the gallery, Laura's tears during that first session, her mother's quiet strength, and the young woman she used to be, writing a letter by candlelight. You did your best, she told that younger self, and that was always enough. A tear slipped down her cheek and caught the morning light. It sparkled like a fragment of the ocean itself. The unexpected message. Her phone buzzed softly, a new email from Claire. Subject line, a surprise from the gallery. Inside was a short note. Daniel asked if you'd accept one of his paintings as a gift. He said it belongs to the person who inspired it. Attached was a photo of the canvas, the letter she never sent. Only now there was a tiny new signature in the corner. Two initials intertwined, E and D. Emily laughed under her breath. Not a romantic laugh, an understanding one. Their story was never about possession. It was about connection. She typed back, "Tell him thank you. And tell him I finally sent mine leaving the harbor." As the sun climbed higher, she stood and took one last look at the letter. Then she gently set it adrift upon the tide. The paper unfurled, caught the light, and drifted out to sea, carrying not regret, but release. Goodbye, she whispered. And thank you for teaching me how to stay when love leaves. She turned away from the shore, walking toward the city, the morning alive with promise and possibility. Life learning reflection, final narration. Some letters are never meant to be sent. They are meant to be written so our hearts can hear the words our minds were too afraid to speak. We spend years searching for closure from others, when all along the truest closure is an honest conversation with ourselves. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about carrying it differently, or like a story we can finally tell without pain. So, if there's a letter you never sent, write it tonight. Not to change someone else's heart, but to free your own. This was The Letter She Never Sent, a story of courage, closure, and the quiet art of forgiving yourself.